Welcome back to Roompact's ResEdChat podcast, a platform to showcase people doing great work in residence life and college student housing as we talk about those topics. So, my name is Noah Montague, and I use he, him, his pronouns, and today I'm going to be your host. As you all know by now, I like to say that I'm a storyteller by trade, and the stories that I choose to focus on are those that center the college student experience and those of housing and residence life staff members, which makes me all the more excited to introduce today's topic and today's host. So, today we're going to be giving advice and talking about advice for new staff entering the field of residence life, while also focusing on the very specific experience of entering the field from a little bit of a different perspective. So, I often like to say that residence life and student affairs in general is not a field that people plan to enter. This is not really a plan for most folks. I know that it was not for me. I planned to be an English teacher in high schools and middle schools, and now I am going on 7 years working in the field at this point. But in a lot of ways, with that, we're a field of people who find community and space and passion in something that wasn't what we expected to be doing with our careers. Oftentimes, that route is majoring in anything under the sun, English education for me, and then entering a student affairs and higher education program before starting work in our field. But what about folks who enter from a different space altogether, maybe who do a different master's degree or who have a different plan for entering the field? How do we do the job while learning how to do it all at the same time? So today we're going to be talking about just that. And that thus makes me so excited to introduce my good friend for today's episode. So y'all get to meet her. So I'm gonna go ahead and let her introduce herself today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emma Grupe. I use she, her pronouns. And yeah, I do have a very different kind of background coming into residence life. I was an RA for 3 years, all throughout undergrad. So I have some of that perspective, but my degrees are totally not related at all to student affairs. So I actually majored in anthropology, linguistics, and Spanish, and my master's degree is in Spanish. So totally random. Does
Yeah.
not seem like it connects at all to residence life. But I actually have found ways to connect it. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. And I'm really excited to be here with you, Noah. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And I'm just really looking forward to getting to have this conversation and get to know you and your experience a little bit more
Yeah.
as well. Well, I guess then getting us started then, Emma, what was it like stepping into your role in residence life without that student affairs background? I know you were an RA for a few years, but without the quote unquote typical two
Yeah.
years of a master's program, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge for sure, especially because I did a kind of a special master's degree. And so at my alma mater, which is Miami, where I work currently, um, I was able to do a combined master's program. So I actually graduated at 21 with both a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. So I did not have like a separate 2 year experience with a master's program. So even that, like starting out really young was very different. Starting out without having like a little extra time of like just being in a master's program, that was also very different. And so it was intimidating for sure. I was kind of entering this field of people who, a lot of which were maybe not much older than me, but a little bit older than me.
Mhm.
I was working with RAs now who are my age or like a year younger. And so
Mhm.
that kind of dynamic was difficult. But it was really fun. I found a really good community with all the people, especially at least here. At my current job, I've been really grateful to have so many like mentors that were willing to help. And so I think that was one of the things that helped me a lot was knowing that I could ask questions and not being worried about that. Because a lot of it is you come in blind. You really have no idea where to start. I started out really, I just graduated. It was awesome. I have a master's. And then I'm like right back down of like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so that which everyone goes through when you're starting a new position in any sort of field, that was like, amplified because I do not have that like student affairs degree background. But at the same time, a lot of it was just like learning as I went, asking questions, embracing the awkwardness and embracing the uncomfortableness. Like, oh, the discomfort. I'm like, I don't know
Yeah,
what this is. Once they embrace it, like, you gotta go with it. And so, yeah, that was,
definitely. And I definitely and even having the master's degree, like I definitely experienced a lot of that as well. Like you mentioned coming in and running a residence hall and staff being around your age that you're
Yeah.
my first year as a graduate assistant, which would have been your first year, like
Mhm.
the same transition, just in how
Yeah.
we went about things, I had two RAs that were older than me.
I had one that was older than me too, like
Yeah.
significantly older than me. He was like several years older than me, and I was like,
Hmm.
"I'm your boss. I have to tell you what to do." So that was a strange
And that
dynamic.
was stressful. It was like
Yeah.
it added to that imposter syndrome and that space of being like, ooh, am I good enough to be
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
And having been an RA myself and that experience and not and my supervisor was significantly older when I was an RA. I didn't have the okay, I'm 23 and about to graduate and my RD is 22.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have that.
I didn't either. Yeah.
And that can be very common. And it was for me. I was the youngest in my cohort. I went through a lot of that imposter syndrome in that space. Um, but having that background as an RA in some ways was almost more beneficial than
I think
the
so too.
degree in some
Yeah.
spaces.
I think the real life experience is some of the most important stuff you can get because there's just some things you can't teach or you can't learn from a textbook, which I know sounds cliche, but it really is true. Like there are times where like the way I manage something is because I watched a supervisor do it as an RA and say, I like that. I want to do that when I'm in that position.
Right.
Um, and so that's kind of you have to kind of go with that and trust your gut in those situations too.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah.
With that though, what do you think surprised you most about the work as you entered it? Like you talked a little bit about some of your experience there so far, but what maybe did you not expect?
I didn't expect a lot of things. It's a really good question. There's like some things that I thought
Truly
were
like figuring out as you go.
yeah, a lot of it was like I thought that I knew how to do something and I was like, actually, wait, I need to do this a whole different way. And I also think coming into it, being an RA, I there were times where I was a little overconfident and not in like a bad way, but just like, oh, like I know what I'm supposed to do here. And then when I actually got into that a situation, I'd be like, okay, I need to reframe this for now being the boss. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I could do this in the way that an RA would, sure, but there's a better way to do it now that I'm above the RAs.
Mhm.
So that was something that kind of surprised me was the way I'd have to reframe my thinking for things to think more as a manager instead of like a managee. I don't know if that's a word, but you know what I mean, supervisee, like that kind of thing. But yeah, that was probably the main thing. And also, so one thing I did not expect was how much I would learn in such a short amount of time. Because I think back to me in August of last year, like first starting this job, and like I am a different person in a good way. Like I've
Wow.
learned so many things. I know how to manage situations that I would have like freaked out about before. Internally, I would freak out internally. I'd be very professional and good. Internally, I'd be freaking out.
Mhm.
And so that's really cool because like now I know I'm like I can handle that. That's not a big deal. I can do that. I've had tough conversations. So like learning so much about myself was also something I did not expect in that thing and my capabilities, like realizing how many and how much capability I do have in this role, that was really cool, but
Yeah.
unexpected. Yeah.
And I always love talking well to you, but also to folks who don't have that same experience with like theory and student development like in that I learned in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because what you just described is the learning partnership model
Isn't
of
that
like
fantastic?
student development and like talking about student like learning with students and partnering with them in their own like growth and learning and that experience and that they often talk about in the learning partnership model is this image of a tandem bicycle and that the supervisor, the RD in our case, the educator is on the back of the bicycle like helping pedal while the student steers where it needs to go. And I love getting to see folks put these things into practice without even really noticing that they're doing it.
Isn't that cool how it works out? It really
Is
does.
what you just said.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that
Yeah.
I know and experience without having a name for. And
Hmm.
so it's really cool to see like you had that experience like you have names for it. It's like that's so
Yeah.
cool. It matches up. I love that. But
And
yeah.
I knew that would happen somewhere in here as well. And just this idea that like experiences and like allowing like a name for something, and that's very prevalent in a lot of different
Yeah,
spaces and
for
like
sure.
having a name for something. But getting to hear you talk about that and that you have grown through
Yeah.
this year as well, and maybe that being something that was a surprise for you,
Yeah.
just so cool to hear.
Yeah.
I think that likewise, that was something that I noticed pretty quickly as I went. Of course, I had the terminology and the understanding feels like the wrong word, but like the expectation that that would happen
Yeah.
because my student affairs professors were like, this is going to be a part of your job
Yeah.
that you are also going to be learning from these students. And that was like an ongoing conversation that we had. Um, and in so many ways during my first couple of years, like I grew and was surprised by that. I came into this job thinking that I had to behave and act a very specific way, and that was like rooted in a lot of interesting like whiteness and professionalism and like what is expected. And like I couldn't be out in my work, I couldn't talk about a lot of things. And very quickly, I actually had two of my RAs at the time. This was my very first year working in residence life as like a supervisor. Two of my RAs made a document, and at the time I was like, that's a little bit weird, but now I think like it taught me a lot and I reflected a lot. They had a running document that they titled Things That We Know About Noah. And there were three things on it because I
Wow.
wasn't talking. I believed that I had to be this professional figure, and as if my experiences, who I am, isn't why I went into this role to begin with. Uh,
Yeah. That's
and
fascinating.
they showed me this list, and they were like, "No, we feel like we don't really know you."
Yeah.
And that was a couple months into the job, and I made that very quick switch. Was okay, they actually want to know who I am, and that matters.
Yeah, I think
Work, I
in
think was one of the bigger surprises that I had. And
yeah,
then I learned about it in classes that that mattered in that space as well. But
yeah,
that
and I
was
love
probably my biggest surprise
I
coming
like
from the
that.
very beginning.
And what were some of the changes you noticed after you started being more like open with your RAs? Like
They were
benefits of that?
significantly more open to me.
Yeah.
I got to know them a lot more. We got to connect a lot more. And I actually had one of those two RAs who like made that silly little list is in student affairs now,
Oh, that's
partially because we were
cool.
able to build that connection and talk. She works in residence life at another institution. Um, but we were able to connect and like build that
Yeah.
space then together, and we keep up.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's
Years from now.
awesome.
And she's getting married soon, which
Yay.
I'm so excited about.
Congrats to her. That's wonderful.
But yeah, I'm very excited. Um, but yeah, that was one of my bigger surprises was that who I am and what is important to me within my own research and my own passions also matters in the job.
Yes.
Um,
I
which
think
I'm
with the job,
sure you relate to as well with the spaces that you care about and the things that you're passionate about.
yeah, I mean, with a job like this, it's so person facing. Like, I mean, literally, our job is to care about people and to assist people. And so, in that sense, I think, yeah, it's so hard to like lock yourself away, and that like there's no way to like kind of breach into like actually being able to do the meat of the job if you're kind of like closed off, which I get. I was also like, when I started out, I was like, it's my first big girl job, as I call it. Like, I have a big girl job. I need to be perfectly professional. But I think also living in the buildings and in our institution, like
Yeah.
we do live in the dorms. And so I think that like, I mean, they're gonna see me in my, flip-flops, my robe, coming out to get something from the vending machine. I'm like, so they see me as a person anyway, so I can be a person. Like that's okay. You just have to be a person. And so that was kind of a fun surprise. I like that about this job because I know that's not the case for lots of jobs.
Mhm.
But for this one specifically, that was a nice surprise, I think, just to be like, yes, I can breathe.
Yeah.
They can see me have a little bit of a crash out and it's okay. Like, as long as we, fix it all together and do it together. So, yeah.
And us being people empowers them to feel like they're allowed to be.
Yes,
They're allowed
absolutely.
to go through struggles if they see us take a day or
Yeah.
be a person.
Yeah. One of the most like I think it was really interesting is that I talked a lot with my RAs. I was really, really honest with them about like I have ADHD. And
Mhm.
so I was really honest with them about what that meant to me specifically in this role. And I found that to be super helpful because I told them, for example, I said, if I don't write something down, it's gone. Object permanence, who is she? She's gone. Like I don't have anything. You're like,
She's somewhere, but she's not here.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, if I don't write something down, it disappears. And so I was really honest with them. I said, if I do happen to forget something, that does not mean I don't care about it. It just meant that I didn't write it down fast enough and I totally forgot about it. And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't care about you or it's not important to me, which like what this thing is, but you need to remind me and I'm not going to be mad at you. And
Mhm.
I had an instance where an RA who was new to my team, he was upset at one point because I had forgotten something. And again, it happens very rarely because I that's something I've worked really hard on is to be on top of that kind of stuff. But it did happen where I totally forgot that he had told me something. Like he just like, and one of the other RAs was like, "Oh, well, remember, like Emma said that she forgets something. It's not because she doesn't care. It's just she just didn't write it down fast enough." And he was like, "Oh, that's right." And then it was like fine, and we had a conversation about it. But it was really cool that my RAs were able to communicate with each other and be like, "Oh, like Emma told us this, like that's okay." And so it kind of like cut what would have been like a bigger problem off at the pass.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, I think being vulnerable with your RAs is a great tool.
Yeah.
That's hard to learn because it's hard to be vulnerable, especially if you're like their age, you know, especially if you're new. But yeah, that was a cool surprise for me as well. Yeah.
Ah, I love that. I think about that all the time
Yeah.
and how different my experience would have been without that. But
Mhm.
thinking a little bit more about how, because we started kind of talking about this idea of like learning and building that confidence in your
Mhm.
role and figuring out what that looks like for you and what that did and still does, because we continue to build that. And imposter syndrome is always present
Yes.
in conversations. But what resources and strategies helped you build that confidence in maybe those early days of getting into the job and figuring things out?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think for me, it was utilizing my system. So
Mhm.
when I met people, and I did have the benefit of like starting work where I graduated from and was an RA at. And so I already knew some of you. But definitely utilizing the people that I already knew, making new connections, saying like asking questions. I know I walked up to you and I was like, no, I really want to be your friend. Like like I was 5 years old on the playground. I said, I want to be your friend. Let's be friends. But we made that connection that it was, then I was able to ask you questions and learn from you. And so that was that's my main point of like, you know, that was my main starting point, I suppose, is for getting used to this job and like learning things. And I also did a lot of research, reading, like, because I didn't have that student affairs, you know, class background. But yeah, I did some research. I did both research in person with the people around me, asked my peers, my supervisors. And I also just like internet. Internet's great. Look up stuff. And so that was a cool kind of tool I use. But yeah, the main tool I would say overall is the people around you. Ask your coworkers, ask your boss, ask your RAs. Maybe they know something, you know, even though they may not know exactly, they may have a different perspective. Um, and so when I kind of adopted that mindset of like we said, learning with people, and again, I was honest with my RAs about that too. I said, this is my first year doing this. Like, we're
Mhm.
gonna learn together. We're gonna figure this stuff out together. And so if I mess up, that's okay. I just ask you give me the same grace I'll give you. And so yeah, a lot of it was just asking questions. Yeah, that's really the main thing is ask all the questions. If you're not sure of something, ask because chances are somebody else has the exact same question that you do, which again, it's another cliche, but it's very true. It's cliche for a reason.
Very, very, very true.
Yeah.
Most cliches are cliches for a reason.
Oh,
I've learned.
I hate when my mom's right. She always tells me things. I'm like,
Me too.
yeah, I'm like, oh, like she's like, you'll get it. Like, don't worry, this will work out. And I'm like, yes, it did, and you were right. But, but yeah, it works
It
out.
does tend to be right.
Yeah. Oh,
But I
goodness.
think for me, like I completely agree with you in our job is to create community for students and to be there and facilitate that and to be a part of students learning who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
While that is so, so, so exciting, who would we be if we were not also working to create that community for ourselves?
It's
And
yeah.
that
Still
community,
figuring out who I am, right? Like we're all still figuring out who we are.
we figured
That's
that
I
out
think
our whole lives.
yeah, I think we're, you know, 10, 12 different people, even more throughout our entire lives. So yeah, we gotta
I
do that.
think that for me, relying on that space, my supervisors when I was entering the role, and still my supervisors now, but also building connections like ours and with other folks that I have on campus and other campuses, and like asking questions. Recently, I had a situation is the wrong word. I had a question around hiring my staff and like what things were going to be looking like with that. And I knew what I wanted to do for my staff, but I wanted to talk to someone with a different perspective about
Sure.
it and be like, I am concerned about perception. I am concerned about and I learned very quickly that my concerns were completely unfounded. And
Yeah.
I, for one,
Always how it
talked
works
to,
out
it
again.
is not how
Yes.
it's done.
Yeah.
But I talked to a colleague from another school and just walked through like what I was thinking, and we had a really open and honest conversation about it. And I ended up doing what I knew I needed to do to begin with, within that space. But I think just having that other person tell me, "You're right.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that
You know
validation.
what you're doing."
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
like, "Yes, I do. You're
Yes,
right. Thank you so
thank you.
much."
You're so
Uh,
right. Thank you. It's like
That really meant the most. But I think especially when you're beginning the role, asking those questions, and for me, when my supervisor every time would be like, "What do you think we should do?"
yeah. Mhm.
And then what he did that I thought was super helpful and I've incorporated into my own practice was he would just say, "Okay, let's do that."
Yeah.
And if it didn't work, I got to learn from that. And if it did, then we got to learn from that.
Yeah.
And either way, I think it was a beneficial place to be. So leaning on that community is so huge.
So important, especially like, going back to the whole topic of this episode is that like I don't have that student affairs background. I have a little bit of RA stuff, but because I don't have the words for some certain things, I don't have the vocabulary, I don't have the experience asking those questions, like, it just builds so
Yeah.
much more of like what we need. It really does. And so asking like, how do I do this in a better way? Is this the right thing to be doing? But you're right. Most of the time it's like, yeah, you know what you're doing. Trust your gut. You're good. Like you already know. So, but I agree. I think another thing going back to like, asking a friend from a different school, I took advantage, another my resource that I did was I took advantage of the conferences that they allowed us to go to or were able to help. We were able to use our professional development funds to go to. And so I went to Glakuho over in, what was it, November?
Mhm.
And that was a really cool experience because again, I was like, I was what, 3 months into the job, like, and this was my first big like conference. And so being able to meet other people who are around my age, who are older than me or younger than me, or, working towards the same goal, but in different perspectives, different areas, that was really cool and really helpful because it made me realize like this could be a career like there and it does so much good and everyone has a different way of seeing how we do things in residence life.
Mhm.
And so that was also a really cool resource to do. So take if you have the ability to do those kind of things, like go to conferences, like do it. I would highly recommend it.
I
Yeah.
would as well. I love a good conference.
And it's so much
And
fun. And it
they
was fun to
offer a
hang out with
lot
you guys.
more space for that connection, that community, but also to learn more about
Yes, I
the
learned
place
so
that
much.
we're in.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it was the coolest. And it was cool that they like there was just so it was just fun. Like I learned so many cool different things. Like I went to all of these different presentations. I didn't even think about being a part of what we do. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Like it gives me words for things. It gives me, more to go on and things I wanted to change after that first semester because I realized like they're working fine, but we can improve upon them. And so that was a really cool way to like develop myself and gain more confidence
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is so cool.
Love
I
it.
think that with that and like developing confidence and like learning more about the field itself, you're also bringing in so much from your other experiences. I know that like even from like my undergraduate degree and like my focus in English literature and creative writing, like I use a lot of that now. Pretty regularly actually, because you and I both know we have to write a lot.
We do.
To have a lot of
It's a
annual
lot.
reports and things like that.
Yes.
But what strengths do you think that you would say that you have brought into the role from your non-student affairs background?
That's such a good question. And so again, my undergraduate degrees was in anthropology, linguistics, and Spanish. My master's is in Spanish. And so again, totally out of left field when it comes to student affairs. But in the same time, it's not.
Mhm.
Um, And I am, you hear me talk about linguistics all the time. No, I'm fascinated by language. I'm fascinated by culture, language. But I found that that actually really does tie into residence life because anthropology is the study of humans. And I'm basically, practicing anthropology every day with some of these students. And so we really do learn how students work, how their brains work, what the culture of a university is, what the culture within an RA team is. And so I think having that background in anthropology and that appreciation for and like knowledge that everyone has a different way of doing things doesn't mean there's one way that's right or wrong. It just is. I think that was a cool strength that I brought in. And again, I'm always an advocate for being bilingual. If you have the opportunity to learn another language, if you already speak another language, keep that up, keep practicing because the amount of doors that it opens is incredible. The
Mhm.
amount of relationships I have been able to make with students simply because they're in Spanish classes, because it's something we have in common immediately. And so being able to utilize whatever your background might be, but bring it into that connection with students. Like someone's like, I had a student that was like, "Oh, I'm taking German." I was like, "That's awesome." Like I majored in Spanish. Like, do you like, is that going to be a major? Is it a minor? Is it just for fun? Like, and we were able to have that conversation, even though we didn't have a language like, we didn't have that language in common. Obviously, we both spoke English, but we didn't have a language of interest in common. I was still able to create that connection. And so I think that's a huge strength that anybody can really bring in is just utilizing what you already have and adapting it to your job. So being able to talk with students, especially there were students that I had that spoke Spanish at home, and it was really cool to be able to talk with them in Spanish just for fun. They were like, "Yeah, I miss talking to my parents. Let's talk in Spanish." It's like, "Great, let's do it." So I think having a second language opens up so many doors. I can talk about this forever, but I won't. I would take the whole 8 hours on that.
And
But
maybe another episode.
yeah, literally just me talking about Spanish has nothing to do with residence life at all. It's just me talking. Oh my gosh, but you can tell I love it. But that's another thing I'm passionate about it. It's something I love. And if you bring that into the position, it's so exciting because students see how excited you get about that. Even like I was really lucky and I was able to study abroad and in undergrad. And so when students come to me and say, I'm thinking about studying abroad, I'm like, do it. It's so cool. Where do you want to go? What are you thinking about? What would you study there? Would you do the Luxembourg program we have here at Miami, or would you do an exchange program? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And so being able to be interested, to be excited with them. I think that's a really important strength that I have. That just comes from being excited about my own things. You can just kind of transfer that. So those are probably my main strengths in terms of residence life. Of course, there's stuff like I have a degree, and so I can relate to them in that things. But for the main, like kind of less concrete strengths, I think those are some great ones right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool that like even though we have those different paths into this, like I related so much to a lot of what you just talked about too. Because like
Yeah.
for me with my background in English literature and creative writing, I have kind of evolved that not only into writing those annual reports that we've already talked about, but
Oh, those annual
also
reports. Yeah.
the annual reports and every other report.
Everything.
Uh,
Every day.
But I have evolved that space into my own research and into talking about storytelling and leadership development and counter story and all of these different spaces of story as helping students find their voice and like what that looks like and being able to kind of take that passion for storytelling that I have and make it into something that makes sense within what I do every single day. And
Absolutely.
asking students like about their lives and about their experiences is inviting them to become storytellers and talk to me and like
And exist within themselves and just
sit
be.
within themselves and kind of understand who they are in a different way because we learn through expressing uh,
Yeah.
as
And
individuals.
language. Language is so intertwined with everything we do, and it's
It
wonderful.
is.
It's so
But also
amazing.
just thinking about like what stories aren't being told and what stories historically haven't been allowed to be told and how I work to prioritize like supporting students of color and marginalized students and LGBTQ students and thinking about, okay, where are the gaps, not only in the literature, but maybe in our practice
Yeah.
and
There
or
are.
literature even like literally in like my fiction background, but also where can we do better as student affairs practitioners in residence life in prioritizing these stories, like is where it comes out for me. And I always think that's like really cool and exciting. Not even
I
to toot my own horn, but like that's where I see my overlap from uh my
yeah,
past experience there.
I actually really relate to what you're saying in that sense in terms of like allowing people to find a voice and utilizing what you know to like help them build a voice because in that sense like language is the same thing. Like
Yeah.
the ways that we communicate, not one, every single person has a different way of communicating. And it doesn't mean that it's wrong or bad or different. It doesn't mean that someone's grammar is wrong. There's no such thing as wrong grammar. It's just the way someone speaks. And so I think that bringing in that kind of like topic we talked about in linguistics class of like prescriptivism versus descriptivism and like be descriptive of something, not be judgmental of like how they sound. That has helped me too in that sense. It's like, it doesn't matter how they sound or how they're talking. It matters that they are talking and it
Mhm.
matters that their voice is being heard. And so that was another really cool thing that the linguistics and language and storytelling can bring into these things. That's really cool. That's neat that we had that kind of similar
Yeah.
connection.
I mean, I mean, linguistics and English have
Yeah.
a good amount of connection.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah. Love
One
it.
might think there's a little bit of overlap there.
Yes.
Uh,
Sure.
but yeah, I think about that often in
Yeah.
how our backgrounds outside of student affairs, because I have the master's degree, but how I work to bring that passion area that
Mhm.
quote unquote didn't work out because I didn't become an English teacher.
Yeah.
That was the degree, that was the plan, and I didn't do it. But how do I incorporate that into my work? I'm enjoying getting to hear that you're doing that in both the same and a very different way.
Exactly.
Because you didn't go for the master's degree straight up until you finished your
Yeah.
Spanish degree.
Yeah. Mhm.
That was your plan. Was
Yeah. I was like, what am I going to do with Spanish? Who knows? But let's, I loved it.
and now we're here.
Yeah, and now we're here and I can still use it. And it's fun to have that other connection with students that are also in the Spanish major. And it's cool to have, I think, connections with faculty too,
Yeah.
because even though like, and again, I think this would be a little bit different if I like didn't go to the place I currently work for as my, undergrad degree or master's degree as well. But even then, like being able to have connections with the Spanish faculty members here, and as with the anthropology members here, because I can say, "Oh, you have that professor. That's wonderful." Like I get coffee with him occasionally. Like that's great.
Yeah.
And so keeping up those connections with faculty too and remaining intertwined with the university or becoming intertwined with a new university, even if you didn't go there as a student, I think is so important because it lets us connect with students, but also like connect with their world.
Mhm.
Because in many ways we share the same world, but in other ways we're totally separate. And so being able to like intertwine and really understand what they mean when they talk about a certain class, that I think is also very valuable in that sense as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. I guess, Emma, to wrap us up,
Yeah.
what advice might you give to a new Residence Life staff member, to someone entering our field, our work for the first time now, with this year that you have under your belt, all the experience that you have in and outside now? What advice would you give? Maybe like one or so pieces of tangible.
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, Ask questions. Always ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid of looking stupid. You're probably going to look stupid, and that's okay because we all look stupid every day. So it's okay. There's always something that you're going to do that's going to be a little goofy. You may make yourself into a fool, but that's okay. Embrace that discomfort. Um, and it was really interesting. I was talking to my aunt who's had years and years and years of managerial experience, and she talked about this kind of notion of what's called the trough of despair. Have you heard of that?
I've
It's
not.
it's a cool like phenomenon where it's basically like you start on top of the world because you just graduated or you're in a job, you know what you're doing, and then you start a new job and you're like in this trough and you have to crawl out of it. And it takes a long time to crawl out of it. And for me, it's taken almost this whole year, and I'm still sometimes in it. But once you do that, once you get out of it, you ask questions, you feel settled, you gain more confidence, then you know that like whenever you're in that trough again, it's going to take you less time to crawl out. It's going to be easier to crawl out of it. And so yeah, I hadn't heard that before until my aunt and I were talking about that. But I think that's a really cool kind of metaphor to like think of like, yes, you may struggle at the beginning, but like that's okay. You're still getting out of it. You're gonna be fine. And then if you have to ever do it again, you're gonna do it so much better because you already know what you need. And so embrace the discomfort, ask questions, don't be afraid to screw up. I've screwed up many a time. It's not the end of the world. You're not a bad person because you made a mistake. Because as someone, as a girly with an anxiety, like that was, I was like, I'm a terrible person. I messed up once. No, just a lot of it is slowing down, just living in the moment and being excited about what you're doing. So yeah, ask questions. That's my main thing though. Always ask questions. It's okay to mess up.
Yeah.
And you can do it, which I know again, back to the cliche, but you can do it. Yeah, it takes a little bit, but once you get out of that trough, you're golden, and then it's just smooth sailing from there.
Yeah. I think that the only thing I would add to that, because I completely agree with
Um,
everything you just talked about. I often say from my old supervisor, Andy Obergamontia, I like to quote him. He would often say, like, if you enter this work caring and showing students that you care, you're already doing 90% of the job.
Absolutely.
And I think about that often, and I've said it on previous episodes as well. So listeners, forgive me for that. Um,
We're back in
showing
the building. Yeah.
showing that care, and in this context, thinking about that quote, if you're coming into this field, whether you have the student affairs background, whether you don't have the student affairs background, you have experiences that you can leverage in this work that are beneficial and that students will relate to. Emma, you got to talk about your work in studying abroad and in your many majors
Yes, way too
across
many. Girl, I
wait,
didn't
wait,
sleep. You kidding me?
three, several
Three,
majors.
basically four, because I did the masters at the
But
same time. I'm insane.
being able to leverage that experience and relate and connect and provide that advice to students, whether you're at the institution you went to as an undergrad or not, working towards that is huge. I know that as I have worked here, like I do the same thing as you do. I'll provide resources with professors, with different folks.
Yeah,
Um, but I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is to trust the experience that you have. A lot
absolutely.
of people apply for these jobs and a lot of people don't get them.
Yeah.
And then the reality of it. And I think
You're
that
here for a reason.
remembering that you were hired to do the work, I know has helped me with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, knowing that I'm here for a reason,
But,
like,
um, but thinking about how to leverage that work and that experience for me, I present not only at Miami, but I've presented around the country on
yeah,
storytelling and leadership now. I've had that opportunity to be able to do that. And you have had the opportunity to go to conferences and be able to connect and learn and create that space with other folks. So I think that trust yourself, leverage who you are and what you've done, and engage with those opportunities as you can
yeah.
would
I
be
mean,
the only
again,
additional things I'd add.
yeah, like you said, you're here for a reason. If you're in it, trust your gut, trust those around you, lean on those around you. Because this job can be hard too. Like there's times where there's crises, there's times where you
Oh,
have to
for
have really
sure.
difficult conversations. And so being able to make those connections with your peers, like it's been great to be able to talk to you about certain things and just don't underestimate the power that you have as a person in this role as well and the community as a whole, like both to benefit you and the students and the job in general. So yeah, don't doubt yourself. You got it. You're
Oh,
killing
I
it.
can say that better myself. So I'm not even going to try. So,
Thank you. I'm flattered.
but Emma, that wraps up our time together today.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you had fun.
I had so much fun. Thanks so much for having me. This is
A little
wonderful.
bit. And thank you all for joining us on today's episode of ResEd Chat. If you have an idea for a topic or a guest that you would like us to bring on, please feel free to reach out to Roompact and let us know. But for now, keep taking care of each other and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now, folks.
Bye.